Good morning, children. Today I'm going to read you The Quilt Maker's Gift. It was written by Jeff Brumbeau and illustrated by Gail de Marcken. Both the words and the illustrations are beautiful. Here's the first part. Those are all different quilt squares. Beautiful different ways that you can combine fabric to make quilt squares. The Quilt Maker's Gift. There was once a quilt maker who kept a house in the blue misty mountains up high. Even the oldest great-great-grandfather could not recall a time when she was not up there sewing day after day. Here and there, wherever the sun warmed the earth, it was said she made the prettiest quilts anyone had ever seen. The blues seemed to come from the deepest part of the ocean, the whites from the northernmost snows, the greens and purples from the abundant wildflowers, the reds, oranges, and pinks from the most beautiful sunsets. Here is a picture. Do you see the quilt maker in her little house in the background, making her beautiful quilt? Here's a picture of the flowers. Some said there was magic in her fingers. Some whispered that her needles and cloth were gifts of the bewitched. And still others said the quilts really fell to earth from the shoulders of passing angels. Many people climbed her mountain, pockets bursting with gold, hoping to buy one of the wonderful quilts. But the woman would not sell them. "I give my quilts to those who are poor or homeless," she told all who knocked on her door. "They are not for the rich." Here are all the people coming, walking, all the rich people walking to her house, hoping to buy a quilt. And there she is on the other side of the door, not willing to sell her quilts. On the darkest and coldest nights, the woman would make her way down the mountain to the town below. There she would wander the cobblestone streets until she came upon someone sleeping outside in the chill. She would then take a newly finished quilt from her bag, wrap it around their shivering shoulders, tuck them in tight, and tiptoe away. Then, the very next morning, with a steaming cup of blackberry tea, she would begin a new quilt. Here she is coming down into the town. And there she is. Do you see her right here? She's found a person who is cold. This poor lady's only sleeping under newspapers. So the quilt maker's going to take her quilt and cover her up. And around you see many other poor people in the dark, people that need help. Now, at this time, there also lived a very powerful and greedy king who liked nothing better than to receive presents. The hundreds of thousands of beautiful gifts he got for Christmas and his birthday were never enough. So a law was passed that the king would celebrate his birthday twice a year. When that still wasn't enough, he ordered his soldiers to search the kingdom for those few people who had not yet given him a gift. Over the years, the king had come to own almost all the prettiest things in the world. Throughout the castle, from top to bottom, in drawers, on shelves, in boxes, trunks, and closets, and sacks, all of the king's countless things were stashed. Here's a picture. All the people are bringing their gifts to the king's castle. But he already has so many things, he doesn't need all those. But still, everyone must bring presents, so everyone is. Things that shimmered and glittered and glowed, things whimsical and practical, things mysterious and magical. So many things that the king kept a list of all the lists of the things he owned. Look at this room. Can you imagine so many things? It's crazy. And look over here. You see that? And there's the king. He's right here by my finger with lists upon lists, just trying to keep up with all the things he owned. And yet, with all these marvelous treasures to enjoy, the king never smiled. He was not happy at all. "Somewhere there must be one beautiful thing that will finally make me happy," he was often heard to say, "and I will have it." One day, a soldier rushed into the palace with news about a magical quilt maker who lived in the mountains. The king stamped his foot. "And how is it that this person has never given me one of her quilts as a gift?" he demanded. "She only makes them for the poor, your majesty," the soldier replied, "and she will not sell them for any amount of money." "Well, we shall see about that," the king roared. "Bring me a horse and 1,000 soldiers." And they set off in search of the quilt maker. But when they arrived at her house, the quilt maker merely laughed. "My quilts are for the poor and needy, and I can easily see that you are neither." "I want one of those quilts," the queen demanded. "It might be the one thing that will finally make me happy." If you look here, you'll see all the 1,000 soldiers marching their way on and on to the quilt maker's cottage. And there's the king at the very front. The woman thought for a moment. "Make presents of everything you own," she said, "and then I'll make a quilt for you. With each gift that you give, I'll sew in another piece. When at last all your things are gone, your quilt will be finished." "Give away all my wonderful treasures?" cried the king. "I don't give things away. I take them." And with that, he ordered his soldiers to seize the beautiful star quilt from the quilt maker. But when they rushed upon her, she tossed the quilt out the window, and a great gust of wind carried it up, up, and away. There you see the quilt floating away, and there's the quilt maker right there, having thrown it out the window. The king was now very angry. He marched the woman down through the town and up another mountain where he had his royal iron makers shape a thick bracelet of iron. Then they chained her to a rock in the cave of a sleeping bear. Once more, the king asked her for a quilt, and once more she refused. "Very well then," the king replied, "I'll leave you here, and when the bear awakens, I'm sure he will make a very fine breakfast of you." Here they are. They're marching the poor lady, the quilt maker, through the town. And here you see different people where the quilt lady has already helped them. And they're sad seeing the kind lady being marched through the town. And this is the picture of the bear that's sleeping. And here they are, chaining the poor lady to the rock so the bear will eat her in the morning. And way in the background is the king on his horse. Later, when the bear's eyes opened and he saw the woman in his cave, he stood on his mighty hind legs and gave a roar that rattled her bones. She looked up at him and sadly shook her head. "It's no wonder you're so grouchy," the quilt maker said. "You've nothing but rocks on which to rest your head at night. Bring me an armful of pine needles, and with my shawl I'll make you a great big pillow." And that is what she did. No one had ever been so kind to the bear before, so he broke the iron bracelet and asked her to spend the night. Here's a picture when he wakes up feeling all grouchy. And there's the quilt maker. She's not scared. She understands. And here is where the bear, she's using her shawl to make a pillow. And the bear likes his pillow. Now, although the king was very good at being greedy, he was very bad at being mean. All that night he could not sleep for thinking about the poor woman in the cave. Oh my, what have I done? He wailed. So he woke up his soldiers, and they all marched in their pajamas up to the cave to save her. But when they arrived, the king found the quilt maker and the bear having a breakfast of berries and honey. Here is the picture of the king feeling bad about what he had done. And here are the sleeping soldiers all having to wake up and go out in their pajamas to go back to the mountain. Here they are following the king up the mountain. And there's the quilt maker and the bear having a nice breakfast together. Now, the king completely forgot about feeling sorry and became angry all over again. He ordered the royal island makers to build an island barely big enough for the woman to stand on her tippy toes. Once again, the king asked her for a quilt. And once again, she said, no. Very well, the king replied. Tonight, when you're too tired to stand and lie down to sleep, you'll drown. And the king left her alone on the tiny island. Shortly after he left, the quilt maker saw a sparrow flying across the great lake. A cold, fierce wind was blowing, and it did not look like the poor bird would make it to shore. The quilt maker called to him, and he stopped to rest on her shoulder. The poor, tired sparrow was shivering, so the woman quickly made him a coat of scraps from her from the scraps of her purple vest. When he was warmed and the wind had stopped, the bird flew off. But he was grateful to the quilt maker for what she had done. Soon the sky darkened as the air filled with a huge cloud of sparrows, thousands of wings beating together. They swooped down, lifted the woman in their little beaks, and carried her safely to shore. There she is, standing on her little island, and there's the little sparrow that she made the purple coat for from her vest. And here are all the sparrows coming to rescue her. Again that night, the king could not sleep for thinking about the woman alone on the island. Oh my, what have I done? He moaned. So he woke up his sleepy soldiers again, and they marched in their pajamas down to the lake to set the woman free. But when they arrived, she was sitting on a tree limb, sewing tiny purple coats for all the sparrows. I give up, the king shouted. What must I do for you to give me a quilt? And here is the king with his soldiers in their pajamas. And there is the lady up in the tree, surrounded by all the sparrows she's making little jackets for. As I said, the woman answered, give away all of the things you own, and I'll sew a quilt for you. And with each gift that you give, I'll add another piece to your quilt. I can't do that, cried the king. I love all my beautiful things. But if they don't make you happy, the woman replied, what good are they? That's true, the king sighed, and he thought about what she had said for a long, long time. So long that weeks went by. Oh, all right, he finally muttered. If I must give away my treasures, then I must. Here's the king talking to the lady when she explained to him they don't make you happy. And here he is, thinking and thinking and thinking for weeks. And there's his kind of weary soldiers in their pajamas down below. The king went to his castle and searched from top to bottom for something he could bear to give away. Frowning, he finally came out with a single marble. But the boy who received it smiled so brightly in return. The king went back for more things. Eventually, he brought out a pile of velvet coats and went about the town, giving them to people dressed only in rags. All were so pleased that they marched up and down the street in a grand parade. Still, the king did not smile. Here's pictures of the king looking for something he could bear to give away. And here are the people after he gave away the jackets in the grand parade. Next, the king fetched 100 waltzing blue Siamese cats and the dozen fish that were clear as glass. There are the Siamese cats that can waltz, and here come the fish that are clear as glass. Then the king ordered his merry-go-round with the real horses to be brought out. Children cried with delight and cartwheeled around him. And just the smallest of smiles began to show on the king's face. Would you like to see the real merry-go-round with real horses? There it is. And there's the king with just the smallest of smiles starting. The king looked about him and saw the dancing and the merrymaking and all the happiness his gifts had brought. A child took hold of his hands and pulled him into the dance. Now the king really smiled and even laughed out loud. "How can this be?" he cried. "How can I feel so happy about giving my things away? Bring everything out. Bring it all out at once." Meanwhile, the quilt maker kept her word and started making a special quilt for the king. With each gift that he gave, she added another piece to his quilt. Look here. Here are all the people dancing. And there is the king, full of joy for the first time. There's the little child who led him into the dance. So the king kept on giving and giving. When at last there was no one left in the town who had not received something, the king decided to go out into the world and find others who might be in need of his gifts. But before he left, the king promised the quilt maker he would send a sparrow back to her each and every time he gave something away. Morning, noon, and night, the wagons rolled out of town, each piled high with the king's wonderful things. And for years and years, messenger sparrows flew to the quilt maker's windowsill as the king slowly emptied the wagons, trading his treasures for smiles around the world. There's one of his wagons, and that's the king, heading out into the world to find people that he could give his gifts to. He went all over the world giving away things. And this is more pictures of the places he traveled and the gifts he gave. Everywhere he went, he found people that could be blessed, and so he gave them the things. He even took the jewels off his crown and gave those away. On and on the quilt maker worked, and piece by piece, the king's quilt grew more and more beautiful. Finally, one day, a weary sparrow flew into her window and perched on her needle. She knew then that it was the last messenger, so she put a final stitch in the quilt and started down the mountain in search of the king. After a little, and here's the picture. There's the quilt maker putting the last stitch, and do you see the sparrow right there on her needle? After a long search, she finally found him. The king's royal clothes were now in tatters, and his toes poked out of his boots. Yet his eyes glittered with joy, and his laugh was wonderful and thunderous. The quilt maker unfolded the king's quilt from her bag. It was so beautiful that hummingbirds and butterflies fluttered about. Standing on tiptoe, she tenderly wrapped it around him. "What's this?" cried the king. "As I promised you long ago," the woman said, "when the day came that you yourself were poor, only then would I give you a quilt." The Green King's great sunny laugh made green apples fall and flowers turn his way. "But I am not poor," he said. "I may look poor, but in truth my heart is full to bursting, filled with the memories of all the happiness I've given and received. I'm the richest man I know." "Nevertheless," the quilt maker said, "I made this quilt just for you." And here is where the quilt maker found him. You notice that his boots aren't so good anymore, and he's reading a story to a child. And here is when she put it around him, and he laughed with joy. "Thank you," replied the king. "I'll take it, but only if you'll accept a gift from me. There is one last treasure I have left to give away. All of these years I've saved it just for you." And from his rickety, run-down wagon, the king brought out his throne. "It's really quite comfortable," the king said, "and just the thing for long days of sewing." From that day on, the king came to the quilt maker's house in the clouds. By day, the quilt maker sewed the beautiful quilts she would not sell, and at night the king took them down to the town. There he searched out the poor and the downhearted, never happier than when he was giving something away. Do you see the king? Let's see. There he is, right there. And he's bringing one of the quilts to give away. There's the quilt maker up here. And that's the end. Here, now you see why there's quilt squares on the front and back of the book. The end. Have a wonderful day. I love you. Bye-bye.